Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Travis, welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, or what I think commonly just say, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. You're a goalie in hockey. Where did you grow up?
So weirdly enough, Oklahoma, which nobody thinks of as a hockey state now, nor did they ever. But in the 90s, when the Minnesota North Stars moved down to Dallas and became the Dallas Stars, they dropped off some of their farm team in Oklahoma City, called the Oklahoma City Blazers, and they built 2 slabs of ice in the city and really started promoting youth hockey. So prior to that, I was actually playing roller hockey, but if you guys are as old as I am, you'd know that roller hockey didn't really exist in the early 90s and the late 80s. It was being played on quad roller skates because rollerblades hadn't been invented yet. That goes to show how old you are. And we played on quad roller skates I was a goalie then, and we played with catcher gear, like baseball catcher's gear, the strap-on pads and the chest pads. And we played with field hockey sticks and this really hard ball. And then
almost like a lacrosse ball.
Yeah. Almost. It was the strangest mix of sports looking back on it. It was kind of a juxtaposition of the early days of roller hockey. But man, it was played in roller rinks that were, not updated from the 70s. So just shag carpet walls and a couple of the rinks, our home rink had this other little area. It was like a standard oval, but then you could cut off into this little extra lane that was like an extended oval that had like whoopie woos and stuff, and you could go do tricks or lose your ball in the forest of bumps.
What was it that drew you to the position of goalie?
I don't really know. I think when I started, they needed a goalie, and I think I got stuck there. And then, I played roller hockey for a few years. And so when I got the opportunity to go see the ice team practice for the very first time, it'd been like really my first time to see an ice hockey player in real life. And my family was an ice hockey family, so we didn't really watch it on TV growing up either. But I remember just thinking like, man, this is awesome. Like, not only is it awesome, the speed and the sound and everything that makes it awesome, but also it was, Oklahoma. So it was 100 degrees in the summer, and most of those skating rinks didn't have the best air conditioning. So I thought it was just great that it was not 100 degrees trying to play hockey.
Hey, Travis, we should mention your full name, Travis Herman. I don't think I said your last name. We should also mention that we connected to you through Stefan Wolfen. What are your thoughts on Stefan? Is he kind of a manly man, or not so much on the ice?
Is he going to hear this?
There's a decent chance he listens to this.
No, he's a good guy. We met up in the hockey rink a few years back, or a few seasons back. And since then, him and another guy you may know, Trey, started up a hockey team of their own and coerced me along as their goalie.
Yeah, Stefan's a great guy, and when he said, "Hey, you've got to talk to this guy I play hockey with, Travis," he's a cool dude and he's got some great stories. So, Travis, I don't know where to go with the question, but when he says you have great stories, what pops into your head?
Man, it's hard telling. After hockey, the fourth period, the beers start flowing, and you never know what got said or what was considered a good story at the time.
I guess it depends on the audience, right?
Yeah, or what led into that story. You get 5 or 6 old guys together with a little bit of booze, and it just takes twists and turns and corners.
So let me back up to Oklahoma. Were tornadoes just ridiculously bad all the time during tornado season?
So to back out of that question a little bit. Before I lived in Oklahoma, I grew up in Kansas, and we grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. But we were kind of at the top of a hill, and it seemed like, at least of my best memory at that time, that you could see from one horizon to the other because there wasn't a lot of trees. It was a lot of farmland. And so when we would see tornadoes coming, you would see them, but they were, a distance away, felt like 3 to 5 miles away. You could see it happening in the distance. And we had a storm cellar, and, it got windy. We'd lose some shingles from time to time. But it just got to be kind of a common thing. And so then when we moved to Oklahoma, we moved into Oklahoma City, and they had the tornado sirens and all of that business. And it seems like they would just sound them every time there was the slightest chance that there could have been a touchdown or something. It really seemed like it never was quite as serious as the ones that you just ended up knowing when they were there. So I kind of, I guess you could say, discounted the importance of them. And there's not to say that a lot of bad things hadn't happened, but really the very worst thing that I've happened in probably the 30 plus tornadoes that I've witnessed, firsthand, was one of them was in Oklahoma, and we had it was a dog kennel that was, kind of like the stock fence that you'd 4 panels and you kind of just bolt it together. But it's not really attached to the ground. It's just like 4 10-foot panels that kind of bolt together. And we had like sun netting put up on it, and the wind caught it and turned the thing into a trapezoid and squeezed my dog kind of in between it as it but then, it immediately blew over and the dog ran away from the fence. But that was really about the only damage or like really kind of the scariest scenario that I ever got to witness. But I've lived very close to some areas that were completely demolished. Just kind of when that big tornado went through more back, I want to say late 80s or maybe 90s. It's really hard to remember when you get this old. Like that was just a few miles away from our house, and our house didn't, maybe a few tree branches here or there got knocked down, but our house really didn't get scathed, and yet that knocked out like a mile wide swath for like 3 miles long and just devastated everything in its path. But it just felt like, they all kind of felt, the city always felt like they made a lot bigger deal about it than the strength of the tornadoes to me.
Yeah, there's the laws of probability, right? And the probability of you being caught in a mile wide tornado that lasts for 3 or 4 miles is pretty darn low. But I mean, if you were part of that, or you had family members that were part of that, it can be devastating.
Oh, definitely, man. Those guys lose everything in an instant. And, it always seems like the tornadoes happen at the dusk hour, right when the earth's cooling off and the sun's going down. So you never really can see the damage until it's just getting ripped off of your house, typically, because it's always dark.
Gotcha. So when you were beginning to make money full time, what were you doing for a living? Were you an entrepreneur right away, or were you doing something else?
No, I actually, so I went to Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, or OU, and I screwed off there and got kicked out academically. Wasn't able to stay in, so I had to go to. I went to work doing what I kind of knew to do, which was working on cars. And I was doing like every crappy grease wrench job that you could do. I worked at a 15-minute oil change place, where they just drive in and you don't even look at the customer. Just somebody from the top, like, yeah, give it a this. You spin off the filter and drain the oil and, send them on their way. And then I worked for some, brake and muffler shop where you just did brakes and mufflers all day long. Then I decided, man, I really need to get back to school because this is a hard way to make a dollar. I remember the boss that I worked for was a little sketchy, and like he would pay bonuses in bottles of whiskey and $100 bills, which, the $100 bills were nice, but it was usually a bottle of whiskey. And at 19, 20, 21, like I didn't really know what a bottle of whiskey was. It was something that old men drank. I was still into just Bud Light and stuff then. So that being said, at that same time in Oklahoma, it was still a 3.2 state, 3.2% alcohol. So I didn't really know what craft beer was. Like I thought that craft beer was like Red Dog, or line what was it, Henry's? No, it was there was this other brand. It was a red ale. Can't even remember it right now. But there were just a few non-Budweiser or Coors brands that you would ever see, and so I thought that was craft beer. Then I finished, so I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I went to Oklahoma State and was working towards that, but turns out I had to have better grades than I was getting to get into vet school. So I continued working on microbiology. I took kind of all the microbiology classes that I needed to graduate, but then I wasn't ready to graduate. I hung around a little while longer, and I took a bunch of chemistry classes. So I ended up double minoring in chemistry and microbiology for my bachelor's degree. And then from there, I started working for this company that tested paint. So they painted high-end towers, communication towers and stuff. And when the paint would fail, they'd try to get this company to warranty it. And this company would go and test the paint and try to find out the piece that made it fail. Anyways, it was really boring. The girl that I was dating at the time moved out to California to take a job, and we broke up because I wasn't ready to move. And then I went out and see her probably 2 months after she was out there and fell in love with California. Came back, packed up my dog and my 10 things that I owned and drove out to California. And there I met craft beer. But before I met craft beer, I started working for a pharmaceutical company. And I was working in the protein purification and fermentation side. So they knew the entire genome of brewing yeast, and they would just take out the genes that made alcohol and put in genes to make a protein. And then this company would brew this exactly like they were making beer, just feed a bunch of dry malt extract to yeast. And instead of making alcohol, it would make this protein. And then we would centrifuge the protein off of the rest of the supernatant and purify it down until you got to the protein that you're looking for. And so the entire time that I was doing that, there were no commercial products based on that technology. But now fast forward 15 years later, and there's some of the drugs that are on the market that end in the name MAB, means monoclonal antibody, which is some of that same technology. So I did that for about 12 years, and during that time fell in love with craft beer, and then started touring breweries, and then kind of realized that I was making beer just in a way different way, and then decided I wanted to do the brewing thing. So started like most people and did the home brewing path, but was just not satisfied, and continued to refine my craft until we got here.
So tell us a little bit about that. What was it like going down the home brewing route? How does one get started in that?
Well, so what I did, it was about 15 years ago that I started this, and there wasn't a lot of information available on the internet. I mean, there was some, but it's not like it is today where there's just, you could read for months and months and get tons of good information. So I started with what was being advertised at the time, which was a Mr. Beer kit, where you just have the can of condensed wort, and you just open the can and plop it in the water, stir it up and dilute it down, and then pour it in a fermenter and tear open a little dry pack of yeast and let her rip. And it tasted absolutely abysmal. It was horrible. And the amount of work that it took to do it was just ridiculous. And so I kind of put that away for a while, but I was talking to a friend who had already done all grain homebrewing and had decided that was still ridiculously hard work and didn't want to do it. So he gave me all of his gear, just kind of free of charge. And so I got a little kettle and a little, the beginning of the louder screen, if you will, which is just at that point a piece of pipe with a bunch of holes punched in it. And, I got the itch. That turned out a little bit better. And then I started doing more research and built a little bit better equipment. And then I wanted to do it at a bigger batch because, you would spend 3 days to make 5 gallons, maybe 4 gallons of beer if you were lucky. And you would drink all of that long before you ever got ready to make another batch. So then moved to 10, and then was too rich to handle in the kitchen. So I also, as a kind of part-time welder from my brake and muffler days, decided I could start welding together my own brew stand. And so I built this pretty rickety stand. Well, I take that back. Before I got to there, I got a turkey burner and I took it outside. But I bought a 40-gallon or a 35-gallon pot, and I filled it all the way to the brim. And like my science mind, I was going to take readings every 10 minutes and see how much temperature I picked up. And I started it, filled it all the way to the brim and started the fire. And for like the first hour, I think I gained maybe like 1 degree. And so I stopped checking it, and I went inside and was watching. I was watching something on TV, and I heard this big noise and a bunch of sounding like water going everywhere. And the turkey burner pot had actually buckled under the weight of this 40 gallons of water that was on top of it. And it put a big dent in the bottom of my brand new pan, and I was like super bummed about the deal. So then I decided to build my own setup, and I cobbled together out of old street signs and pretty much any pieces of metal I could find. And that was kind of my first foray into like, now I can make beer. And so I decided I was going to go learn to do it. And at the time, my wife worked at the University of California, Davis. And so I was able to use the family discount to get into the brewing science program there at University of California, there in Davis. And we lived in the next town over, which is Vacaville. That's where the Novartis plant was at. And so anyways, I thought that, that was how it was going to go. So I did my program there, and then I immediately applied to all the breweries in the Bay Area, thinking that they were just going to, see my degree and like immediately hire me on for the brewmaster position. And it turns out that that's not the way that it works in the real world, nor would I hire that guy for that position at my brewery now. But yeah, so they still want you to start at the bottom and wash kegs and fill and, work your way up. And I just wasn't prepared to do that. I was making over $100,000 a year in the pharmaceutical game. Just had a good job and had a car and a house and things that I had already signed up to pay for. I couldn't just go back to taking a $35,000 a year entry-level position. So I had to put that on the back burner for a little while longer, and I continued to homebrew and build my homebrew stand until I got to 355-gallon Blichmann pots, and it was all gravity fed, and it was all built out of 5-inch square tubes, so it ended up being like a 1-ton brew stand. But I was turning out a lot of beer, and the itch was still there to want to make the jump. So I enrolled in another brewing school out of Vermont called American Brewers Guild, and I went there and got my brewing certificate from that place. And that part of getting your accreditation from that place, or accreditation, I don't know if I put the wrong term in there, but you have to end up in an internship, and you have to successfully be able to solve a series of things that the internship sets up for you. And so I got to really lucky. I bought this RV from not knowing at the time a tweaker. I didn't know what that really was, but I bought this like tweaker RV.
Hey Travis, hold on. Tweaker meaning like a meth head?
Yeah, like this thing had been in the woods of Santa Cruz, and it had like tarps and tents all over it, and the guy was just living in it. And I guess he went away or something, and his mom sold it for like $1,200. It was this really ghetto. The like Volkswagen vans with the pop up top. They're called Westphalia.
Yeah.
That company also partnered with Toyota in 81 and 82, and they basically put they took a Toyota truck, which in 81 was just a basic 2-wheel drive, little tiny truck, and they cut the frame and stretched it 5 feet, and they put this big fiberglass box on the back of it with like a tilt top, and that's what this thing was. And I guess that was way too much for those cars. So in the early 90s, from what I could tell from researching this thing, they had recalled them all because the axles were breaking and the trucks were flipping over and killing people because the axles weren't designed to have so much weight on them. And this one somehow survived. And so I bought it for practically nothing. It was a Toyota, so of course it ran. And I gutted the inside of it, and I put all kinds of IKEA hardwood floor all over the inside. And thought in my mind, I never even went down to check this out, but in my mind, anything in San Diego was sunny and beach. And this internship at the Lost Abbey was in San Diego, actually Escondido, but as far as the map concerned, it looked like San Diego to me. So I thought I was going to be able to drive down there and just pop the top of this thing in the middle of summer and just feel the ocean breeze all day. But Escondido is not near the ocean, and it's like 110 in the shade all summer long. So I really busted my ass at my internship, mainly just because I didn't want to sit in my RV that didn't have air conditioning or a fan. And so I parked the RV behind the brewery and got a 3-month membership to 24-hour fitness. And I ride over to 24-hour fitness and take a shower and do my maintenance. And then I just live working until the sun went down. And then I'd take my shift gears and go sleep in my RV and wait for the next day to start.
So at this point, had you already walked away from the $100,000 job and all that?
Yeah. I'd already decided this is what we're going to do. So a few other things had happened in there that got rid of the house and the car. The 2006 financial crisis being that. So it was easy to get at that point. It was kind of like, all right, we got this really bad situation to happen, but at the same point, it allows you to kind of pursue this thing that you couldn't pursue before. So yeah, it did that. Then from there, I got offered to move down there, but I couldn't get my wife to relocate because she still had a really good job in the Bay Area. So I respectfully declined and went back to looking for work in the Bay Area, and I was lucky enough to get hired on at Russian River Brewing Company, and I worked there and learned so much from the industry, and then from there left to work one more year as an apprentice or as a brewer's apprentice at a brewery in Chandler, Arizona, before coming to Atlanta to start Rafa.
Wow.
Hey, so go ahead, Daniel.
I just wanted to hear more about the apprenticeship model. Is that like very, very common in the brewmaster world?
Yeah, it's probably one of the two paths that you take to kind of get where you're going. One being the I'm just going to start at the bottom. I'll come in and clean stuff and sweep, and what else can I do, kind of thing. And then the apprenticeship model, yeah, I think it gives you some real world experience, because even having experience working around cylinder conical tanks and pumps and hoses and pressurized vessels and sterile wort, I still didn't understand a lot of the terminology
Sorry about that.
A lot of the terminology that's based around like brewing that is kind of industry specific, and then there's just a lot of techniques that instead of saying, for example, the word louder, and so I'm going to louder and void off, and you're just like, man, that sounds really intense, and really all you're doing is just filtering and recirculating. But using the German terminology, it's a lot. You have to learn a lot of you have to learn the lingo, and you kind of have to learn the process of the specific brew house that you're working on. And having an internship kind of helps that, because in the real brewing world, most breweries are run really lean, And the fact that they don't really have a guy who can just stand around and train you. If anything, it's like, start following me, you'll catch on. But at the same time, the the word that I'm looking for, the risk, I guess you would say, for the brewery is that, if you get a mistake and let's say you're running near capacity, it could cost you half a month's work if you lose a beer at the wrong time. If you lose a beer near the end of fermentation, you've lost 2 weeks of work and time that tank could have made another beer in. So it's a high risk. So most, brewery owners, as a smart business person, it's not really worth the risk of training somebody at an expense that has such a great amount. So it's, you do feel better getting somebody who's been through an apprenticeship because you've already kind of got a chance to evaluate them before you just throw them to the wolves.
How easy is it to like mess up the process and lose a batch or whatever you call it of beer?
There's 100 chances every day. There's 100 chances. It's really hard. It's not really hard. It's very methodical to make good beer. You have to think of it in a very methodical way. And if you do one step or don't do one step in a series of 100 steps before the process is done, it could really mess the whole thing up. And then if you don't have a system in place to have accountability for whether it gets done, whether that be a log and a check mark going, yeah, I did it, or just having somebody that you can trust confident enough to know that they do all those steps, you may never know what went wrong. You may think that something that you did was wrong, or something with the water was wrong, or something with the yeast is wrong, and really it was one guy who forgot to do one step, maybe purge the extra sanitizer out of the bottom of a tank before putting the yeast in and killing it with the sanitizer. That's just one tiny step. The tank was cleaned perfectly, the beer was brewed perfectly, but there was that one little step that threw the whole thing down the drain.
Hey, so Travis, the young lady who you visited 2 months after you broke up in California, is she your wife now?
She is.
She's your wife. And what year did you get married?
Well, so interestingly enough, I took her to prom. We dated through high school and through college. And then we got married, and you're going to put me on the spot. She's going to listen to this.
Oh, no. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, man.
No. I want to say it was 04. But I know the date. Well, yeah, no, I just put myself in a thing.
Yeah, I just inadvertently got you in trouble, man. Sorry about that.
Nah, she's well, when you're with somebody that long, I think it still just counts as a lifetime, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Of course, that doesn't always work when I try to explain that to my wife.
Yeah, no, it always sounds good when you forget the anniversary, and then you're like, no, every day is an anniversary with you.
That's right.
They don't
right. Never. Hey, so y'all were married when you were doing the thing down in Southern California.
As a matter of fact, and maybe this is where some of the stories started to come out, but she was 8 months pregnant and came down to visit me, and we took that crappy little RV and went to this campground with my 80-pound Labrador, and it was a Southern California campground in August, so it was really hot, and we were just trying to make the best of it, and my dog had come across a skunk and fought with this skunk and got sprayed several times. And so I've got an 8-month pregnant wife and a 100-degree camper shell with a freshly sprayed Labrador. And it was a pretty miserable time. She was happy to get back on a plane and go back home and give me another month down there before I brought my dog and stinky RV home.
Yeah, that had to be the bottom for your marriage, I'm guessing.
If we made it through that, that was a very fun, interesting night, trying to make that smell go away. But we didn't even rent a hotel. We toughed it out.
I can't imagine having an 80-pound dog who's been sprayed like that, staying in a small space with your pregnant wife. I can't imagine.
It was brutal.
Hey, Travis, I just pulled up your website and there's a picture of 4 guys. One of them I've seen on TV, the guy with the orange glasses on the side. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Are you in this picture?
I am. I'm that handsome fellow there with the big beard.
You have a giant beard, dude. I'm so
Yes, sir.
jealous.
Yeah, I just shaved it off in mid-January. It was a lot, and I like to eat burgers, and you can't really take a big bite of anything without ending up with a mouthful of hair when you got a beard like that.
So you can't see me, Travis, but I have a beard that's been growing for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. The thing you have in that picture looks like it was growing for over a year.
Yeah, so maybe again, this is maybe similar to what Stefan was talking about, but the previous time that beard was cut, it was done by Rachel Ray.
What?
No way.
Yeah, not Rachel Ray herself, but one of her stylists. They done a man makeover, and I got nominated somehow, and so they came out to Georgia and shaved my head and my beard and put me in some Spanx and skinny jeans and like zip up boots, and then they flew me out to New York with my family, and they put us up in a nice hotel and gave us some money to go out and have a good time and put us on the show. It was pretty cool. And then I completely outgrew those Spanx and those pants and let the beard and hair grow and didn't do any of the things with the moisturizer or anything that she told me I should have.
So wait a minute. Were you a guest on the show?
I was.
And what were you talking about? Your brewing or your life story?
No, it was I don't know if you watched much Rachel Ray, but it was maybe a minute of airtime. There's like a whole day of cooking, and then they're like, yeah, we did this man makeover, and I think they had 1 or 2. I think it was, honestly, I didn't watch I just watched the part that I had, but I think it was a series of maybe 3 or 4 people that they made over for their spouse. And it was maybe a week-long thing, and I was just one of the guys that got made over on that day. But there was she didn't really ask me much. It was kind of like you stayed behind the area where she's cooking at, and then they're like, all right, commercial break, come out here and, answer whatever she asked you, and then like, okay, commercial break, beat it, get out of here.
Wow.
And, yeah.
Hey, so
all the up to it part though was like there was a lot of, like I said, they came and cleaned up my house a little bit, and then they like gave me a haircut and went and got all these clothes for me, and there was a lot of like interview off camera stuff, I guess, before that. And they used maybe 30 seconds of the 5 or 6 hours of interview on the actual show.
yeah, it's a strange business, those shows that do those sorts of makeover kind of things. Hey, so I say he's famous, but I can't remember his name. He's a cooking show guy, right?
Yeah, that's that. The guy that you're talking about, that's Andrew Zimmern, and he's the dude that eats all the weird stuff in all the weird places. That's his most known thing. But he also does cooking show. He's a Travel Channel guy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, and he's pretty entertaining too, right?
Yeah. He's got a really interesting story. I didn't know this until my mom had seen this picture and she recognized the guy, and she didn't get a chance to talk to me about it. So she just did some research and then turned around and told me the story about it. But I guess he had problems with alcohol earlier in life and went sober. And then when he came and visited us this day, he actually, without me saying, hey, do you want to try one of my beers, actually asked to try one and drank it. I don't think he drank the whole thing, but he had a 3 or 4 sips out of it. And so I just told my mom, I was kind of like, hey mom, like this guy actually drinks some of my beer. He's eating the worst things, and he's eating grubs and toenails and things in all kinds of weird cultures, and he didn't complain about my beer. And she's like, yeah, I read this thing about him, and I guess he doesn't drink. So I was really surprised that he gave it a whirl.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine he turned back to heavy drinking after his visit with you.
Yeah, I don't think he did that. I couldn't get him to do any keg stands or anything.
Hey, Travis, who else is in the picture besides you and Mr. Zimmer?
So the other guy that's there, he is these two at the works. I know I'm going to say his name wrong, but I want to say it's Kevin Gillespie. I'm not sure that I'm saying that name right. And then the guy that's on the other side of him is my business partner, Matthew Shira. And so me and Matt own Scofflaw, and Andrew and Kevin are fathering the food hall project that's there. So at the works, it's a 80-acre complex that has shopping and dining and a brewery, and a bunch of open spaces and concert spaces and townhomes. And these guys have a concept that's already successful in New York, and they are the ones that are spearheading this concept here. And so they're kind of managing the food hall, and we're handling the business, not managing the food hall, but overseeing the food hall, and we're doing all of the beer on the property.
That's an awesome opportunity, right?
Yeah, it's the amount of exposure that it's going to give us, and the ability to kind of finally have a nice spot to actually have a beer is huge. Not that the brewery, the Scofflaw main facility isn't a nice spot, but it was never meant to be a tasting room. Even when we started, it was just a tour place. And so there's no air conditioning, there's no fences, or there's no walls or anything that separate it from the manufacturing space. And there's always pumps and forklifts and canning machines and motors and, alarms and things going off. And it's always 100 degrees in there. Or it's, 50 degrees in there because the garage doors get open. But it's not really a good spot to go for like a date night, where this new spot is. That's got fancy wooden tables and art and lighting and temperature control and ambient music. It's a much more refined way to enjoy a Scofflaw.
What's the name of the larger what did you say, 80-acre complex? What's that called?
So the name of it's called the Works, and then this our brewery there is called Dr. Scofflaw's Laboratory and Beer Garden, or Dr. Scofflaw at the Works. But the name of the entire complex is called The Works.
Cool, that's awesome. How often do you interact with Andrew Zimmer?
This was a one-time thing. He's probably out there more often, but this was he kind of wanted to meet us, and we kind of wanted to meet him. I think probably more the other way around. I think we wanted to meet him a whole lot more. But this was just an opportunity where we were all in the same place at the same time.
That's really cool. Hey, so you've essentially been an entrepreneur for a while now. And when did you start Scofflaw? What year was it roughly?
2016.
Okay, so 2016, you guys were rolling along, I'm guessing, doing pretty well, and then COVID strikes. Tell us about March of 2020 until now, what that experience has been like running Scofflaw.
Well, so obviously with the bars closing and social life stopping as we know it, we were predominantly draft beer. We were probably 70% draft and 30% cans. And we had been really fortunate to have that ratio because our kegging line was much better at packaging large amounts of beer than our canning line. Our canning line was kind of limited to 35 cans a minute if it was running good, and it didn't run an hour. It didn't run an hour without usually having some issue. So you can never really get good, reliable numbers off of it. We were lucky in knowing that it was our Achilles heel early on. And so we had already designed and paid for and had delivered in February of, it actually was delivered in December of 2018. with the schedule to be through customs and commissioned on February of 2019, an Italian canning line that could do 250 cans a minute. And we thought that this was going to be the solution to our biggest bottleneck. And then COVID hit, and they were not allowing anybody from anywhere to travel anywhere, but especially not Italy. So at the same time, we no longer had any need for draft beer. There were no bars ordering. And all of the grocery stores and liquor stores were selling all the alcohol that they could sell in cans. So we immediately needed a whole bunch more cans than we had. And we had this beautiful canning line ready to fill them that we could not get commissioned. So we kind of went all hands on deck and started running our old canning line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just doing everything we could do to get some beer in package. And luckily we were able to shift with the amount of resources that we had, and we brought in a bunch of people that were out of work bartenders to help do some of the more repetitive tasks that didn't require, knowing how to operate a piece of equipment. And we were able to still do really well, switching 100% over to cans. We donated over $200,000 to a few different charities that help support the service industry workers in a few different states. But that has, turned around. These are people that normally would be selling your beer at the bar who, now are still employed. They buy your beer and they convince other people to buy your beer. And so that was able to keep us afloat during COVID. We pivoted a little bit. We had already had contacts because we just recently started the vodka and gin side of the business. So we had access to distilled grain spirits. And so we were able to dabble in, we jumped both feet into the sanitizer production. There for a few months, we made over 2,000 gallons.
Oh, wow.
We packaged it in a lot of different formats and donated a lot, sold some, but we were able to stay employed and keep all of our employees employed and employ some temporary employees or employ some people temporarily during that time. So it was lucky for us, a lot luckier than a lot of people were.
Yeah. And what's it like now? Is it basically back to a new normal, or are you guys still trying to be super creative to keep going?
It's getting back to normal. The bars are open. Some of our biggest accounts still, we had a bar at State Farm Arena. That was a big outlet for. They're not doing games in full numbers yet. So the numbers are still down as far as the skew of 70 to 30. It's probably a little bit more like 50 or maybe even 60-40 now package. But at the same time, with our new canning line now up and fully functional, we're able to fill the orders that people want, and we're able to, there were people who wanted to carry some of our products, and we just literally didn't have enough inventory to fill that. And so we're able to fill inventory in places that we previously couldn't. So it's getting back to normal and getting back to the production. Production at the rate that we were doing before.
And you enjoy doing what you do on a daily basis?
I definitely enjoy doing what I do on a daily basis. It's not the way that I pictured it in my dream, but I also didn't realize how very hard brewing is, and if I would have stuck with doing it in the way that I pictured, I would be probably broken by now. I thought I love the romantic side of, tearing open the bag of grain and throwing it in the mill and, wiping down the brew system at 5 o'clock and going and standing at the bar and having having a chat with all the guys and talking about the beer that you just made. But the reality is that, all of that is incredibly hard work. And for you to be able to do it at a scale that, the economy of scale makes sense, you need an army of people to help you do that. You can't do it all yourself. And then the moment that you can't do it all yourself, you sort of lose that glamour side of doing it all yourself. But that being said, you actually can still move around at the end of the day. And, it's probably a good thing having a wife and 2 kids. You probably shouldn't just stand and drink at the bar every day from 5 o'clock to, 8 o'clock, like how I pictured it was going to be awesome to do when I was in my 30s and thought that was like the coolest thing that you could do. And it was in your 30s, just not so good when you got kids.
Yeah.
Society looks down upon you when you, come home drunk every night.
Yeah. Well, the polite society for sure. Yeah. Maybe not that tweaker from
from
SoCal.
Santa Cruz.
Yeah. Hey, how did you and Matt meet, or how did you guys form your partnership?
So we actually met through a mutual friend. His name was JP, and it was kind of that commercial, again, kind of showing my age here, but Reese's peanut butter cup commercial where the guy, the kids walking down the street with the peanut butter, eating the peanut butter out of the thing, and the other kids walking down the street with the chocolate bar, and they run into each other and they're like, "You got your peanut butter in my chocolate." Like, "Oh, you got your chocolate in my peanut butter." The commercial.
Hey, so Travis, how old are you?
I am 45.
Oh, you're a youngin', man. I'm 52. Of course, I remember that commercial.
Okay, all right. So it was kind of that. Like, JP had a buddy who was interested in. They were already in the craft beer business, and were wanting to in the craft beer retail business, bars, and we're wanting to get into the brewery business. And I had always wanted to own my own brewery, but had to go through the apprenticeship and learning how to run the business side of it first. And so he knew somebody who wanted to start a brewery, and he knew somebody who also wanted to start a brewery, and so he put us together. And it was about a year and a half romance, kind of between the time that we started to talk about it, and then visited Atlanta, then looked at places and talked about it, and then brought the whole family to Atlanta to visit for a while, and kind of felt the vibe, and then decided in 2014 that we were going to do that. And it took us 2 years from 2014 to 2016 to brewing in the basement and looking for facilities and getting leases and getting equipment and getting all the things that it takes to build a brewery together. It took us about 2 years to get that done. And
you guys are still together and still making it happen?
Still together, still making it happen, still growing. Like I said, we opened up Dr. Scofflaw's at the Works on Halloween night. We're currently in the process of opening a distillery in Kentucky, and obviously have a couple more things in the fold that always looking to grow.
Hey, so you said distillery in Kentucky. Are you talking vodka and gin or bourbon?
Bourbon.
Yeah, I guess that's the only thing you can put in a distillery there, right?
Yeah, you would definitely be frowned upon if you did anything else there.
That's got to be the most competitive place on earth to try to make bourbon.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones there for sure.
So, are you going to call it Scofflaw Bourbon, or are you going to call it something else?
No, it's going to have the name All Nations Bourbons.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm a fan of bourbon, Travis. So any time that I have a hankering, I might text you.
All right, please do. Bring you down and show you the whole operation. That's
really cool. So you guys broke ground, or you have a place you're going to do it?
We have the location. We have not broke ground. It's in the drawing stages right now, in the raw drawing. So which direction is the building going to sit on the property, kind of thing. Gotcha.
Are you going to bring in somebody who makes bourbon professionally, or are you guys going to try to figure it out yourselves?
No, we've got, we're going to bring somebody in who knows how to do it.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
imagine the
it's,
process is pretty different than making beer.
it's really similar in a lot of ways, but much like making beer, there's a lot of nuances. You really have to have a taste for bourbon to know, when to go from your heads to your hearts to your tails, like really when to cut it and when to, the Kenny Rogers saying, like, know when to hold it, know when to fold. I guess you really have to know that. I would imagine that doesn't happen in the length of time that I've been drinking bourbon.
So, Travis, what's your hockey team's record this season?
So I play on 3 different teams and I coach 2.
Oh my gosh.
The team that I'm playing on tonight is 7-1-1. So this will be a fairly easy night tonight, I'm hoping.
How many for this particular team? You're 7-1-1. How many goals have been scored against you this season?
Well, it's beer league hockey, so they're probably higher than NHL numbers.
So wait a minute. What are the final scores typically? Like 11-9?
I would say 5, 7-5 is a pretty normal number. Some of the games when everybody shows up and it's not, midnight on a Friday, because you can definitely tell the performance level. If it's 6:40 on a Sunday, like usually people are still pretty sober. The games are, 2 to 3, but you get the 9:40 on a Friday game when the guys have been in the parking lot drinking for 2 hours. That's when you start seeing the 7-6 games or the 9-2 games. When everybody's just like, I could skate, but the reality of it is I don't think my wife's even asked what my team's record is. That's how little it matters.
Yeah, it sounds like you're gonna. It's more likely to have an injury too for those late night games.
Yeah. Well, the beer muscles help, right? You get that social lube and those beer muscles. You think you can do it, and find out the next morning that you shouldn't have tried it.
Hey, do you know Mark Hammerstrom? Do you play with him?
I do. I was a goalie for their team for a couple of seasons down there at Center Ice in Sandy Springs.
Yeah, has he told you the story of how he busted both of his groins muscles, like pulled both of them, and he put icy hot on them?
Oh no, but that sounds like an absolute miserable choice of treatment.
He said it was the worst hour of his life. Oh man.
Yeah, that pain does not go away quick.
No, it doesn't. And it's apparently that part of your body's really sensitive.
Definitely.
Oh man. Hey, so you mentioned wife and kids. What's your wife's name?
My wife's name's Connie.
Cool. And how many kids do you have?
I got 2. I got a Benjamin and a Jackson, so I got 120.
Nice.
And we're 9 and 7. They're 20 months apart. They both play hockey.
And if you had another kid, it sounds like you probably wouldn't, but if you had another one, I guess that would be Hamilton.
Yeah, unless it was a girl, and then it'd probably have to be Sacagawea.
Ah, nice. You've given this some thought. You've definitely given this some thought.
Yeah. Well, we were prepared.
No, I understand. There was no theme to the naming of my children. It's good times. Well, hey, Travis, I really appreciate you taking time. We'll let you hang out with the fellas and maybe have another beer or two before your game. What's the average number of beers imbibed before a hockey game typically?
I'd say a good rule of thumb is you bring a 6-pack and you have 3 before and 3 after, if they're like double jeopardies. If it's if it's the lower grab stuff, I'd still go with the 12-pack and maybe 4 to 5 before and the rest after. And it's more of a fact that you just can't go pee after you got your gear on. You don't need too much in you, otherwise you got to stand out there and do the pee-pee dance for 75 minutes.
Yeah, you got to be pragmatic about it. You don't want to do the pee-pee dance on the ice. Very cool. Man. Well, Travis, great talking to you, man. I'm glad Stefan connected us. Have a great game tonight, and we wish you nothing but the best, man.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for the opportunity. It was a good time.
All right, awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Cheers.
All right, see ya.
All right.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.